So I just got Jagged 3 and I don't really like it that much. Now, first I'd like to point out, I think it's a fun game. It's charming in a certain way. It has some good production value in the landscape design. And developers put a lot of care into the backstories of the characters, of the old ones, and make new characters. However, as a successor to Jagged Alliance 2, I think it's not good. Okay, now for this to make sense, I'd like to show a small history of Jagged Alliance and similar games. Okay, way back in 1994, XCOM 1 came out, XCOM U for Defense, the original game. And here's an inventory screen from U for Defense. Now, notice in that game you had different weapons, you had magazines for those weapons, and I'm emphasizing magazines right now because there's a pretty large problem with that in Jagged Alliance 3. And if you already played the game, you probably know what I'm talking about. So you have weapons, you have magazines, you have pistols. Those were grenade launchers, 3 different ammo types. Automatic grenade launchers, 3 different ammo types. Rocket launchers, rockets, of course with different warheads. Smoke grenades, normal grenades. And I remember when I was playing it way back, the cool thing about this game was, if you, for example, would put a pistol as a backup weapon in your belt and a magazine over here, it would actually matter where you put it on the character, because it would cost a different amount of time units to grab something from the belt than picking something from the backpack. And that's a game made in '94 that considered that. So even just equipping your character, putting the main weapon on the character, putting the backup weapon on the belt with some magazines so it's easier to reach, there was a gameplay element that you put a lot of time into getting right. Okay. Let's look at the next screenshot. Now this is Jagged Alliance 1. It came out in '95, and I think it was heavily influenced in some level by XCOM 1. Or perhaps coincidentally, there were similar games. You can see here, Fidel. And notice here, you have a 45 caliber pistol, magazines. Again, I'm emphasizing magazines. Here, magazines, loose ammo. Grenades. Okay, then next screenshot, that's Jagged Alliance 2. Now the screenshot is a bit cut off. You have a bit more playable screen in the original resolution of the game. Now this is the main inventory screen of a character. Notice here you have the main gun. And the gear the character is carrying, that's a slot for helmet and a slot for the night vision goggles or glasses. Then you had slots for small items like magazines and large items. Okay, next screenshot. This is Brigade A5. Probably you might not ever have heard of this game. I think it came out in 2005, and I think it's a Russian-developed game that was inspired by Jagged Alliance. And its main feature was it was real-time, that you could pause. However, it also had some other innovations, which are on the inventory screen, depending on which type of pouches and vests you get different types of slots. And different things would fit into them, okay? And the game would even take into account how much time it would take for each weapon to raise to fire. That's something the original XCOM game actually does too. Okay, next screenshot. That's, I think, the successor to Brigade A5. Again, the same Russian developer, I think. Came out in 2008 or something. Now, to see the different stances. And in this game, walking with your weapon raised would actually tire out your character. So there was like a gameplay element to not keeping your gun raised all the time. Okay, next screenshot. Now, this is from Jagged Alliance 2. However, the items you see are from the Jagged Alliance 2 1.13 mod. So in Jag 2, when you conquered the main airport of the island, you could go to Weapon Online Shop and order all types of different weapons. And I think most experienced Jag 2 players would agree with this statement I'm saying, is that you probably spend 40 to 60% of your entire gameplay time just window shopping through that shop, thinking about what gear to buy, how to equip it in your character. It was such an important gameplay piece. Okay. And then you probably know this game, this is Escape from Tarkov. And I consider Escape from Tarkov the ultimate expression of what XCOM started. A game with detailed ammo and character gear management, and Escape from Tarkov obviously appears to be inspired by this. And I think the Escape from Tarkov developers were probably around my age, probably played XCOM or Jag 1 or 2 as kids, because the similarities are here with the inventory system. Okay, then that's a screenshot from the Jag 1.13 mod. It's a gigantic mod that added new features to Jag 2 and kept it a classic that people play to this day, 20 years after its release. Or wait, it's probably 24 years now. Now the screen is normally horizontal, but it's in the global strategic screen. Notice here, that's the regular Jag screen, and notice what they added. You have a second slot for large weapon, then that's your slot for the rig you're carrying. Depending what rig you put on, you have different amounts of slots and different types of slots. So there was a small pocket for loose items like bullets. Then here you got a slot for leg holster, and this leg holster is a pistol holster that fits a small pistol, or a regular size pistol, and 3 magazines for it, or a bottle, a small bottle. Then you had slots for backpacks and large backpacks over here. So now after this introduction of the history of this type of games, and this is, I think, where Jag 3 is disappointing. And let me just load a game to show you. Because as we can see in the little history I just showed you, is that the gear management of the game was always a gigantic piece of the game. Like what the character's carrying, the way they're carrying it, and how to use it in combat. And on a strategic layer, where to get the items, where to sell them, where to buy them, that was always a huge part of it. Okay, so notice several problems with this game. Now the first major, absolutely huge problem that I noticed on screenshots before the game was even out is the following thing. So I go to the inventory screen. Notice what's wrong here. Remember I pointed out magazines a few times in the screenshots earlier. You see something that's wrong here. Notice there's not a single magazine on that screen, okay? Which means the developers cut out magazines as gameplay elements, like as physical things you carry in a pouch with different types of bullets in it. So you still have a magazine on your gun, for example here. If you get a special extended magazine, it's like an attachment to your gun. However, they're not physical objects that you carry multiples of and manage them in combat or in the gameplay. Okay, they cut that part out. And that's already an extremely bad decision for a Jag game. Which means there's not a word for it, they're dumbing down the gameplay experience around gear management because somebody probably thought it would better to streamline it, or they probably thought players wouldn't care about it. And as a replacement, we got something nobody even asked for, okay? Which is the perk system. I think the perk system was added because it's easier to code. And I think perk systems suck in most games. Because I think they're like a temptation, a low-hanging fruit for a game developer to fill a screen with nice buttons that look like content, but for the most part, they're just tiny bits of code. See, for example, making magazines an actual part of gameplay. That's a lot of programming work. You have to simulate each magazine, how much fits into it, when you put it in the gun, how it performs. There's a lot of gameplay programming involved in that, okay? However, in perk systems, there's not very little compared to that. And it's not a replacement for what is lost in this game. So, for example, let me show you. In most perk systems video games, you have 1 or 2 perks in a perk tree that make sense, that are fun, and the rest is 80% or so is just filler that the developers have to invent quickly to fill the screen with buttons you can click. Okay? For example, this one, Rage. Deal 10% damage per wound, capped at 50, which means if you hurt more, you do more damage. That doesn't make any sense, because in a game about tactics and combat, the only thing that does damage is the bullet coming out of the barrel, and depending how much gas pressure was behind it, and where the bullet impacts, and what type of body armor the person is wearing. And every game since the XCOM games refined the realism of that. And the natural expectation would have been that Jag 3 would take this to the next level. Instead, they did the opposite. They completely dumbed it down and gave you a perk system. Okay, and that's not good. Now, the next problem with the inventory system is that the game doesn't take realism that seriously, which it should do, because I think the average player of Jag is probably somebody who plays Escape from Tarkov and other tactical games, and probably obviously plays Jag too. And the developers of this game, they made an effort in advertising this game as a strategy heavyweight, which is literally said on the Steam page somewhere, and that it's the true successor to Jag 2. And they even make a small diss on the other Jag franchise game between Jag 2 and Jag 3 that they didn't develop, that other teams developed. And I think the game fails at fulfilling that, being the true successor to Jag, because they just streamlined away too much of the gear system. Okay, so for example, if you're an average Tarkov player, and I think almost everybody on the planet who plays hardcore FPS games or medium FPS games plays Escape from Tarkov. So it's not anymore a niche thing to know that, for example, a Dragunov rifle shoots larger bullets than an AKM rifle. Okay, they both have 7.62 bullet diameter, but if an Escape from Tarkov player probably know that an SVD rifle fires the Russian 7.62 by 54, which is a much larger bullet than the 7.62 by 39, which is fired from an AKM or AK-47 type weapon. And the problem is this: in this game, they simplified it. See, WP standard. So the Dragunov fires the same ammo as an AKM in this game. And to make it worse, it also has a automatic fire mode, and I don't think an SVD in real life has automatic fire mode. And what makes this worse is that when you set up a reaction shot, which means enemy walks into your cone of fire and you have action points left, your character reacts to it. And the problem is, if there's an automatic fire mode on any weapon, the character will use the automatic fire mode, which means you end up in a situation where your SVD ambush fires a burst out of an SVD. And the next problem is that the strategic layer of the game doesn't actually give you that much strategic freedom. I think on a tactical level, this game is sort of fun, because the way machine guns work, the way you can set them up, there's some tactical realism to it, which is fun. The problem is on a strategic layer, it looks like you have choices, but you really don't have many choices. Okay, let me explain. So you start the game over here. Okay, then you have to take those sectors, take the harbor. Eventually, you have to take this place, and the game very tightly controls the gear you can get or you can find, because as I said, there's no real weapon shop. You sometimes can find a highly scripted weapon sold by an NPC in a certain sector, like an M14. I think somewhere on the coast where you can buy an M14. Or you can find the K98 German bolt-action rifles, I think in this sector on a tower. And if you don't find it over here, those two sectors are going to be extremely difficult because you're outnumbered and outgunned by enemies with automatic weapons. Okay, so the game is highly streamlined and scripted. And you notice that when you play it again or restart the game, this thing almost plays exactly the same every time. And as I just mentioned, there's no airport you can go to have a large shopping list of weapons. So yeah, that's it, I think. The game is a charming game in its own kind, but it feels like it's a browser or mobile game variant of a Jagged Alliance game. And they stripped out the most important part, which is the complexity of the gear management. And yeah, I think that was a bad idea.